In this course, we'll be taking a look at the Amazon Web Services Training and Certification exam for Certified Developer at the associate level. Just looking at the exam blueprint, you'll notice that the third bullet point in the introduction shows some of the services that will be covered in this exam, such as Amazon Simple Storage Service, Amazon DynamoDB, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon Simple Notification Service, Amazon Simple Workflow Service, AWS Beanstalk, and AWS CloudFormation. With that as cited as important, that's going to be a very big portion of what this course is all about. Now, if you move a little bit further down in the exam blueprint, you'll see under General IT Knowledge, and I like to think of this as kind of like prior knowledge to sitting for the exam. So the kinds of things that they think are important are an understanding of stateless and loosely coupled distributed applications. We will look at some of the services, such as SQS and Simple Workflow Service, that really facilitate developing stateless and loosely coupled distributed systems. There's also a prerequisite familiarity with developing RESTful API services. In this course, I'm going to try to introduce some code examples, and the framework that I'm going to introduce is Express.js, which is a common framework to use with Node.js on the server. But we're not going to get into a lot of detail. We're just going to get into kind of the basic high-level concepts behind building RESTful API interfaces. We will introduce a little bit about the differences and advantages and disadvantages between relational and non-relational databases. I'll also introduce you to the messaging and queuing services offered by AWS so that you have that basic background. In addition to general IT knowledge, there's some prerequisite recommended knowledge of AWS in general. What they're looking for in prepping for sitting for the exam is professional level experience with AWS technology, some hands-on experience programming with the APIs, an understanding of AWS security best practices, and I'll point you to a couple of white papers I think will give you a good foundation for how to prep on that front. An understanding of automation and AWS deployment tools. The two that we'll be looking at are Elastic Beanstalk as far as deployment, as well as AWS CloudFormation as far as automation. They also expect that you have an understanding of the various storage options and their underlying consistency models. So we will be looking very deeply into Amazon S3 or Simple Storage Service, but we'll also touch on CloudFront and Amazon Glacier as well. And then it's recommended that you have, it says, excellent understanding of at least one AWS SDK. From my experience, that's really not necessary in terms of passing the exam, given that it's very conceptual and high level, but I certainly think that's something that I'm going to try to introduce you to, at least the Node.js SDK, and getting your feet wet with what the kinds of things that you can do with the AWS APIs. So let's just move on down. You'll see that there are a number of white papers here that it's recommended that you take a look at, such as Developing on AWS, Cloud Computing white papers. I will have a module or lesson on the AWS documentation. I think it's probably one of the more important things that you're able to do is to, find the answers to whatever questions you might have as you get more and more familiar with the various services. Exam is broken down into 4 domains, and they're not equally weighted, so I think it's worth just taking a quick look at the various weights. AWS fundamentals is really only 10%, and that's really about what the various services are, what they do, but not necessarily knowing the specifics of how to work with them. And they do place a little bit of importance on that, but only 10%. The largest portion is designing and developing. And that's really an area where you need to understand some of the nuances of working with these APIs. The ones I'll probably talk on the most are like VPC and DynamoDB and S3. At 30% weighting is deployment and security. Security is certainly important in terms of your decision to move to developing within AWS or any cloud for that matter. So I think it's worth touching on various services that they offer to help you to really lock down and secure your infrastructure. We'll talk very deeply about IAM, which is their Identity and Access Management System. But we'll also touch on the use of NACLs within VPC subnets. We'll talk about security groups. around your EC2 instances, which are kind of virtual firewalls, and just a high-level general overview of like the shared responsibility model. And then the final 20% of the exam is on debugging. And I really think there's some good questions that I experienced on my exam that really tried to get at assessing your ability to kind of process the kind of holistic view of a system. So it's more than just knowing facts and knowing kind of details about how the services are supposed to work. It's a little bit about having an understanding and being able to demonstrate an understanding of how these pieces fit together. Now, as far as the test itself or the exam, there's really two types of questions. There are multiple choice questions, which, you're kind of familiar with those. You're given four options. You pick the one that's correct. But there are, I would say more than a few, actually maybe 30%, that are kind of what I call multiple select, or I think they call them multiple response. And these are really where they give you maybe five choices and they ask you to pick the three most correct. And I think those are significantly more difficult. So I do think it's important that you walk in with a strategy about how you want to approach the exam. And what I generally do is, go to the exam and try to get through all the questions that I know and I'm pretty confident about, and then kind of skip the ones that I don't. And the way the test is designed, you can always circle back and review the questions you're not sure about. And then when you do that, I think it's important to point out that you might want to just like look through each of them and try to take off the list those that are clearly wrong. Even if you narrow it down to three as opposed to four or two as opposed to three, you greatly improve your odds, even if you end up guessing. And there really is no penalty for guessing. So just try to narrow it down and take your best guess at it, and then try to answer all the questions on the exam. And I think you'll do fine. Well, that's about it for this introduction. Just wanted to kind of walk you through how the course was organized and what kind of my objectives are in terms of helping you get to where you need to in terms of prepping and hopefully passing the exam.